The atmosphere in the exclusive lounge was electric, powerful men discussing powerful things. Deals worth billions were being made over quiet conversations and clinking glasses. At the center of it all sat Elon Musk, the man who shaped industries with a single tweet. He was in his element, surrounded by some of the most influential people in the world. And then, his eyes landed on Keanu Reeves. Keanu wasn't like the others. He didn't flaunt his wealth, didn't chase attention. He sat quietly, dressed in his usual simple attire, that small, worn-out necklace resting against his chest. A piece of jewelry that seemed so out of place in a room full of status symbols. Elon leaned back, a smirk playing on his lips. "Keanu, that necklace of yours, man. What's the story? Looks like something you'd find in a thrift shop." A few people chuckled, nervously. The kind of laughter that fills the air when someone pokes fun at the wrong person. But Keanu? He didn't react. He simply lifted the pendant between his fingers, his expression unreadable. The light caught the metal, revealing faint, worn-out engravings. And then, in a voice calm, steady, but carrying the weight of something far deeper, he said, "This necklace, this belonged to the only person who ever truly believed in me. The one person I couldn't save." The laughter died instantly. The air felt heavier. Even Musk, always quick with a witty comeback, found himself at a loss for words. What happened next would make Elon Musk regret his words more than he ever had before. For a moment, the entire room stood still. The soft hum of background conversations, the clinking of glasses, the quiet murmurs of the elite, all of it had vanished into silence. Elon Musk, usually the sharpest man in the room, leaned forward slightly, his smirk fading just a little. He wasn't expecting that answer. No one was. The way Keanu held that necklace, it wasn't just jewelry. It wasn't an accessory. It was something far more significant. The pendant dangled from his fingers, catching the low, golden light of the lounge. His eyes weren't focused on Elon anymore. It was like, for a moment, he had drifted somewhere else, back in time, back to something that still weighed heavy on his soul. Someone cleared their throat, awkwardly shifting in their seat. "Wait," a voice finally broke the silence. "What do you mean, Keanu?" Keanu let out a slow breath, like he was choosing his words carefully. His fingers curled around the necklace again, his grip tight, almost protective. "She gave me this before everything changed." Elon tilted his head, intrigued now, but still skeptical. "Who?" Keanu looked up, his eyes dark and unreadable. "Someone I lost. Someone I owed everything to." The words hung in the air, heavy and unshakable. No one dared to speak. Even Musk, who had started all this with a careless joke, now found himself unable to laugh it off. Keanu sighed and leaned back, his fingers still absently brushing against the pendant. His voice was steady, but there was something in it, something raw, something real. "Before the movies, before the money, before anyone knew my name, there was just me and her. We had nothing. No backup plan, no safety net. Just each other." The way he spoke, it wasn't for sympathy. It wasn't for attention. It was like he was speaking to himself, like he had carried this weight for too long, and now, just for a moment, he was letting someone else glimpse it. Musk watched him carefully. He was a man of logic, of numbers and data. He built empires on innovation and strategy. But in that moment, none of that seemed to matter. There was something different about this. Something real. Keanu's fingers traced the edge of the pendant again, lost in thought. "She believed in me when no one else did. I used to think we had time. That one day, I'd give her the life she deserved." His voice dipped slightly, just enough for the people closest to him to catch the change. "But life doesn't wait," he continued. "And sometimes, you don't get the chance to say goodbye." Elon exhaled, sitting back in his chair. The room felt heavier now, the weight of Keanu's words pressing down on everyone. "So that necklace," Elon finally said, his voice quieter than before, "it's not just jewelry." Keanu shook his head slowly. No, he said simply. It's a reminder that no matter how much you have, no matter how successful you become, the things that truly matter, they can be gone in an instant. A hush fell over the room again. No one had expected this. What started as a joke, a simple jab at an old necklace, had turned into something no one was prepared for. Elon shifted slightly, looking at the pendant once more, but this time, there was no humor in his expression. Only thoughtfulness. Maybe even a hint of something deeper. Keanu sighed, leaning forward, his hands clasped together now. You spend your whole life chasing things, money, power, status. But at the end of the day, none of that can bring back the people you've lost. None of it can replace time. The words settled over everyone, sinking in like a weight that couldn't be ignored. And for the first time that night, Elon Musk had nothing to say. The silence in the room stretched longer than anyone expected. Keanu's words still hung in the air, heavy and unshakable. No one looked at their phones, no one whispered side conversations. For a room filled with billionaires, actors, and the most influential people in the world, it was rare, almost unheard of, for them to be at a loss for words. Elon Musk, always the sharpest mind in any room, tapped his fingers on the table, his usual confidence flickering for just a second. He had meant for his comment to be nothing more than a light-hearted joke, just another playful jab in an evening filled with meaningless conversation. But now, something about Keanu's story had unsettled him in a way he didn't quite understand. He studied the necklace again. It wasn't flashy. It wasn't the kind of thing someone like Musk, who surrounded himself with the best technology, the best cars, the best of everything, would ever notice. Yet here it was, holding more weight in this room than anything money could buy. Keanu leaned back, his fingers resting lightly on the pendant. He wasn't angry. He wasn't even trying to prove a point. He was just remembering. One of the other guests, a well-known venture capitalist, cleared his throat, shifting in his seat. Keanu, man, I didn't know. We all see you as this calm, untouchable guy, but it sounds like you've been through a lot. Keanu gave a small, almost sad smile. Everyone's been through something, he said simply. Just because you don't see it doesn't mean it's not there. Musk exhaled, his fingers still tapping against the table, this time more slowly. He wasn't used to being the one caught off guard. He had spent years navigating the most ruthless industries, winning battles against competitors, pushing boundaries that others wouldn't even dare to touch. Yet now, sitting across from Keanu Reeves, he felt something he rarely felt in conversations. He felt small. Not in the way that he wasn't important, not in the way that he had failed, but in the way that, for all the things he had built, for all the things he had conquered, there was something Keanu understood that he didn't. The air in the room had changed. The conversation was no longer about a necklace. It was about something deeper, something unspoken. A reporter who had been invited to the gathering finally broke the silence. Keanu, if you don't mind me asking, who is she? Keanu's fingers stilled against the necklace. He exhaled, his jaw tightening just slightly. For the first time, there was hesitation. Everyone leaned in, waiting. Even Musk, who had started the conversation with an easy smirk, was now fully focused. There was something in the way Keanu looked at that necklace, something that made it clear this wasn't just a name he could casually throw into a conversation. Then, Keanu did something unexpected. He gave a small chuckle, shaking his head. You know, he said, it's funny. People see me in movies, in interviews, and they think they know me. But there are some things you hold on to, not because you want to hide them, but because once you say them out loud, they become real again. Musk, still watching him closely, leaned forward slightly. So why carry it? He asked. His voice was quieter now, more curious than challenging. If it hurts, why keep it with you? Keanu's gaze lifted to meet Musk's, and for the first time that night, there was something unguarded in his expression. Because some things shouldn't be forgotten, he said. Some people shouldn't be forgotten. Musk didn't respond right away. The room was silent again, but this time, it wasn't the awkward silence from before. It was different. It was the kind of silence that came when people were thinking, really thinking. One of the other guests, an older man with gray at his temples, finally spoke up. "Regret is a funny thing," he said softly. "You don't realize how heavy it is until you're carrying it every day." Keanu gave him a small nod, as if he understood exactly what he meant. Musk exhaled, rubbing a hand across his jaw. He had spent years making the impossible happen. He had built rockets that defied gravity, cars that redefined an industry. He had solved problems no one else could solve. But now, sitting across from Keanu, he was beginning to realize something. There were some things even he couldn't fix. And for the first time in a long time, Elon Musk didn't have an answer. The weight of the conversation still hung in the air. The room, once filled with quiet murmurs and easy laughter, now felt tense, as if everyone was holding their breath. No one had expected the night to take this turn, not Elon Musk, not the other guests, and certainly not the reporters who had come expecting casual business talk and industry insights. Musk tapped his fingers against the table again, slower this time, his mind working through something he couldn't quite put into words. He had faced intense debates, corporate battles, and public scrutiny, yet something about Keanu's words had struck him in a way nothing else had. Keanu still held the necklace lightly, his fingers brushing over it as if the touch itself kept a memory alive. The pendant was old, the edges worn smooth, yet it seemed to hold more value than anything else in the room. One of the guests, a well-known entrepreneur, shifted uncomfortably in his seat. "Keanu, I get it, man. I really do. But doesn't it weigh you down? Carrying something like that with you every day?" Keanu lifted his eyes, studying the man for a moment. "It's not about weight," he said, his voice calm but firm. "It's about remembering. When you lose someone, when you lose a part of yourself, you don't just move on. You carry them with you. Not because it's heavy, but because letting go would be even heavier." Musk exhaled sharply, his gaze still locked on Keanu. He was used to being the one who had all the answers, the one who saw solutions where others only saw problems. But this wasn't something he could calculate, something he could engineer his way out of. He leaned forward slightly. "Who is she?" he asked, his voice quieter now, more careful. "Not just to you, but in the grand scheme of things. What did she mean to your life?" Keanu let out a slow breath, his expression unreadable. He glanced at the pendant again, turning it between his fingers, before finally speaking. "She was the reason I believed in myself before anyone else did. The reason I didn't give up when I had every excuse to. She was my anchor in a world that didn't care if I sank." The words cut through the room, sharp and undeniable. The older man who had spoken earlier nodded slowly. "And now, you carry her with you," he murmured. Keanu gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. Musk sat back in his chair, staring at the pendant as if he could see the weight of it, the history woven into its metal. The tension in the room had shifted now. It was no longer about a necklace, no longer about a careless joke. It was about something deeper, about the things people carry, the regrets that never fully fade, the ghosts that linger in the quiet moments. Then, one of the reporters hesitated before asking, "Keanu, you ever think about what she would say to you now?" Keanu's grip on the necklace tightened for just a second, a flicker of something unspoken flashing through his eyes. "Every day," he admitted. Musk, watching him closely, felt something shift inside himself. He had spent his life pushing forward, chasing the next breakthrough, the next impossible goal. He had built an empire on the idea that nothing was truly unattainable. But for the first time, he was beginning to understand something else. There were some things you couldn't chase. Some things you could only remember. The room felt smaller now, as if the conversation had pulled everyone into the same unspoken realization. And then, just as the silence threatened to stretch too long, Keanu finally looked up. His expression was calm, but his eyes carried the weight of 1,000 unspoken memories. Some things in life, they don't need to be explained. They just need to be honored. Musk exhaled, his fingers still resting against the table. He had come into this conversation expecting nothing more than an easy evening. Instead, he had found something he never expected. And in that moment, he regretted ever making that joke. A heavy silence filled the room, stretching between the guests like an invisible thread connecting them all to something unspoken. Keanu's words had landed with weight, and for the first time that evening, no one seemed interested in small talk or business deals. Even Musk, who was known for his ability to control the tempo of any conversation, sat in a rare moment of stillness. But just as the tension settled, a voice cut through the air. "That's a beautiful sentiment," a woman near the back of the room said, her tone measured, almost too precise. She was a journalist, one of the sharp ones, the kind who didn't just report stories but uncovered them. Her gaze flickered toward Keanu, then back to Musk. "But I can't help but wonder, is regret really the right word here?" Musk turned his head slightly, caught off guard. "What do you mean?" he asked. She leaned forward, resting her elbows on the table. "Well, it's just interesting, isn't it? A conversation that started with a joke about a necklace somehow turned into something much deeper. Almost like it struck a nerve." Her eyes narrowed slightly, calculating. "But why? Why would someone like you, who's always looking ahead, always moving forward, get caught up on something like this?" The question lingered in the air, and for the first time all night, Musk didn't have an immediate answer. He glanced at Keanu, who remained composed, his fingers still lightly resting on the pendant. The journalist continued. "See, the thing about regret is that it usually comes from something personal. Something that still haunts you." She tilted her head slightly. "So, Elon, what is it about this conversation that made you stop?" The shift in energy was instant. Up until now, Musk had been in control, even in moments of uncertainty. But now, the conversation had turned inward, and he was no longer just an observer. He hesitated for just a second too long. The journalist caught it. "Maybe," she said slowly, "this isn't just about Keanu's story. Maybe it's about yours." Musk's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "That's ridiculous," he said, but the usual confidence in his voice wasn't as sharp. Keanu, who had been quiet until now, finally spoke. His voice was calm, but there was something knowing behind it. "Sometimes," he said, "the things we dismiss the fastest are the ones we don't want to face." The words hit harder than Musk expected. He let out a slow breath, shifting in his seat. He wasn't used to being on this side of a conversation, where the questions weren't about numbers, projections, or the next big idea, but about something deeper. Something uncomfortable. And then, as if the universe itself wanted to push the moment further, Musk's phone buzzed on the table. A name flashed across the screen for only a second before he flipped it face down, but it was long enough for Keanu to notice. A flicker of recognition passed through Keanu's eyes. "That name," he said quietly. "I know it." Musk's grip on the phone tightened. "It's nothing," he said quickly. Too quickly. But it wasn't nothing. And Keanu knew it. The journalist leaned in. "Looks like we just found our real story." For the first time that night, Musk wasn't the one leading the conversation. He was in the middle of it. And no matter how much money, power, or influence he had, this was one moment he couldn't control. The room felt smaller now, the air thick with an unspoken tension. Musk's fingers hovered over his phone, his jaw tight, his usual easy confidence nowhere to be seen. Keanu's gaze remained steady, reading something in Musk's expression that no one else could see. The journalist leaned in slightly, her curiosity sharpened to a fine edge. Musk exhaled slowly, his fingers finally releasing the phone as if it had burned him. "It's nothing," he repeated, but this time, his voice lacked the conviction to make it believable. Keanu didn't press, but his eyes held something deeper than curiosity, understanding. The kind that didn't come from guessing but from experience. "You don't have to say it," he murmured, his voice calm, steady. "But you should ask yourself why you don't want to." Musk's shoulders tensed. A million thoughts ran through his mind, calculations, projections, ways to steer this conversation back into familiar territory. But none of it worked. 'Cause Keanu was right. He wasn't just caught off guard by the necklace. He was caught off guard by what it made him remember. The journalist's voice was softer now, more measured. "It's not just about a joke anymore, is it?" Musk closed his eyes for a brief moment, as if debating whether to speak. When he finally did, his voice was quieter than before. "I lost someone too." The words landed like a shockwave. The entire table seemed to still, everyone aware that they had just crossed into uncharted territory. Musk didn't look up. His gaze was fixed on the table, on the phone, on something only he could see. "A long time ago. Before the world knew my name. Before SpaceX, before Tesla, before any of this. She was everything." He let out a short breath, almost a laugh, but it held no humor. "I thought if I kept moving forward, if I kept building, kept pushing, I could outrun it." Keanu nodded, as if he had already known. "But some things aren't meant to be outrun." Musk's fingers traced the edge of his phone, his mind somewhere far away. "When I saw your necklace. I don't know. It just brought everything back. And I made a joke because that's easier than admitting the truth." He looked up then, locking eyes with Keanu. "I regret that." Keanu's expression softened. "Regret is just proof that we still feel. That we still care." He paused, then added, "And that's not a bad thing." For a moment, there was nothing but silence. Then, Musk did something no one expected. He reached into his pocket and pulled out something small, something that had been hidden away for years. A simple, unassuming bracelet. Worn, faded, but still intact. He set it on the table between them. Keanu glanced at it, then back at Musk. He didn't need to ask who it belonged to. He already knew. The journalist, for once, had no words. The story she had come for had changed into something else entirely, something real, something human. Musk let out a slow breath, then picked up the bracelet and closed his fingers around it. "Maybe," he said quietly, "some things are meant to be carried." Keanu gave a small nod, his fingers brushing his own pendant once more. "Maybe they are." The moment passed, the weight of it lingering even as the conversation shifted, as the night moved forward. But something had changed. Not just in the room, but in Musk himself. As he stood to leave, he glanced at Keanu one last time. There was no joke, no bravado, just a quiet understanding. "Thanks," Musk said simply. Keanu smiled, the kind of smile that carried years of knowing. "Anytime." And just like that, the night continued. But no one would forget what had just happened. Because some conversations change everything. The night carried on, but something was different. The energy in the room had shifted, less about business and status, more about something real. The conversation no longer revolved around deals or innovation but around life, loss, and the things people carried with them, hidden beneath the surface. Musk stayed for a little longer, but his usual presence, the sharp, commanding persona he carried in public, was softer now. He spoke less, listened more. Keanu, too, seemed to recognize that the moment had passed but left behind something meaningful. As the event wound down, guests slowly made their way out, returning to their own lives, their own carefully kept secrets. The journalist, who had come expecting a story of rivalry and arrogance, left with something much more profound. She didn't need to write about a joke gone wrong, this was something deeper, something people would feel. Outside, the city hummed with life, neon lights flickering across the sleek black car that waited for Musk at the curb. He stood there for a moment, the night air cool against his skin, the bracelet still in his palm. He hadn't held it in years. Keanu stepped beside him, hands in his pockets, his expression calm as always. "You gonna keep running?" he asked, his tone light but laced with meaning. Musk exhaled a quiet laugh. "Maybe not tonight." He looked down at the bracelet, his thumb running over the worn threads. "You ever think about how much we leave behind, trying to get ahead?" Keanu nodded. "Yeah. But sometimes, what we leave behind is still with us. Whether we acknowledge it or not." Musk turned the bracelet over in his fingers before slipping it into his pocket. "I don't usually do these kinds of conversations." Keanu smirked. I know. Musk shook his head, a small, amused smile playing on his lips. You're a strange guy, Keanu. Keanu laughed at that, a warm, genuine sound. Takes one to know one. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Just two men, standing in the glow of the city, each carrying ghosts of their own. Then, Musk took a breath and extended his hand. Keanu shook it without hesitation. Take care, man, Musk said, stepping toward his car. You too, Keanu replied, watching as the door shut and the car pulled away into the night. Keanu stood there for a moment longer, feeling the weight of the evening settle in. Then, with one last glance at the city, he turned and walked away, the pendant around his neck catching the faint glow of the streetlights as he disappeared into the night. Some moments don't need headlines. Some stories don't need to be told. They just need to be felt. And tonight, something had shifted, not in the public eye, not in the grand spectacle of the media, but in something far more important. In the quiet spaces where real change happens.